disrupting the order and solemnity of religious services at the Unitarian Church of Montreal, but I think as a result of some pressure put on them by certain members of the church, not the least of them being Jeremy Searle, who was a city councillor. And I even believe that, I'm not sure if it was at the time, but I think Jeremy Searle, city councillor, even at one point was involved with the Security Commission. So he had perhaps some influence in terms of police. I mean, he would have had influence anyway as a city councillor, but nonetheless, I know for a fact, for instance, that Jeremy Searle wrote letters to the police, demanding that I be arrested. So at minimum, he did that. I actually had, the letters were part of the evidence. So I remember that. But what I'm getting at is, Station 12 police, on the whole, were pretty good. There wasn't a great deal of abusive interactions, as I recall, in terms of Station 12 police. There were one or two. But it's really when the jurisdiction got switched over to Station 11 that things got a little bit more problematic. And again, that might have something to do with Jeremy Searle, because he was an NDG, Côte St. Luc city councillor. So now, the police station was in his, turf, as it were. So it's entirely possible that the increase in police interventions and the sort of strong arming of certain police officers might have had something to do with Jeremy Searle pulling strings. And then again, maybe not. I'm speculating here, but I think it's a reasonable speculation, especially in light of the fact that I do know with absolute certainty that Jeremy Searle was directly involved in the arrest in December of 2000 for disrupting the order and solemnity of church services, which I was, ultimately acquitted of the crime when the Crown prosecutor was unable to prove a single one of the 4 or 5 points of law that he had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to obtain a conviction. He actually threw in the towel and asked me to make a motion of non-suit. And because I wanted to expose the, wrongfulness of what actually happened, the wrongfulness of being arrested, I actually declined making a motion of non-suit and made it very, very clear that I wanted to present a defense, even though I didn't have to, because I wanted in my defense to, underscore how this was a miscarriage of justice. And essentially what happened is the prosecutor didn't want that happening and moved for an acquittal a few days later. And because I was in the process of moving, I did not get properly served the notice of that court date, so I was completely unaware of it. And the prosecutor moved for an acquittal, and it was granted, and this prevented me from presenting the defense that I wanted to present, even though, as I said, it was totally unnecessary because he had failed to prove his case, and I had acknowledged that fact. I'd have to say he was at least honorable in doing that, and I actually I don't mind saying that this young Quebec Crown prosecutor who handled the case, he was doing his job. He was young, inexperienced. Basically fed a pile of bullshit by members of the church, which he unfortunately swallowed hook, line, and sinker. I actually spoke with him prior to going to trial, and telling him, you know, I'm outside. I got picket signs. I'm not making a lot of noise. You know, they can't really see me. Good day, sir.
Can they clean off your signs for you?
Are they covered in snow?
Oh no, it's just plastic.
Yeah. Thanks for the offer anyway. I might take you up on it one day if they are covered in snow.
For tomatoes.
Tomatoes, yeah. That could happen, I suppose, one day. So anyway, getting back to where I was at, this Quebec Crown prosecutor, who was a young guy, you know, maybe mid to late 20s, early 30s, not older than that in my estimation, possibly even young 20s. He was quite a young fella, and you know, I tried to get him to drop the charges, even though I was like thrilled to bits to be able to go to court and show what idiots these people are and how they go to extreme lengths to try to shut down this protest. I had no problem doing that, but you know, in practical terms, it shouldn't have gone to trial at all. And I was quite open to having the charges dropped and just, you know, forget about it. But because this poor guy had been fed a pile of lies by Jeremy Searle and Val Bourdon, perhaps other members of the church, he thought he had a case against me and proceeded. You know, in the end, he had nothing. He couldn't prove a single one of the 4 or 5 points of law which he had to prove, and so he threw in the towel. You know, he admitted that he had been unable to prove even one of the things he had to prove. He admitted that, you know, he had no case against me, and essentially threw in the towel. And so I, you know, and besides, I think quite honorably doing that, because I was representing myself in the trial, he actually treated me as if I was a lawyer. I wasn't a lawyer, I was just representing myself, but in his interactions with me personally, he treated me with respect and politeness and so on, which again I think was a good thing. It sort of, how can I put it? Well, it was a good thing. Put it that way. It was good that this prosecutor, you know, in his relations with me, in terms of dealing with the case, treated me with respect and politeness and so on. He wasn't nasty or aggressive or, you know, contemptuous or anything like that at all. So no hard feelings with him at all. And I should say that the judge was also very good too. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, but an older, clearly experienced judge who also, you know, showed considerable respect for my rights, you know, within the court. He made sure that things were done properly. So, you know, I had a good judge, I had a decent prosecutor, and everything turned out fine in the end, other than it was a colossal waste of time, you know, and taxpayers' money. But it was, you know, it was a good learning experience for me. You know, I learned how the criminal justice system works, because this was the first time I'd ever really had anything to do with it in terms of being charged with a crime. So it was, you know, a good learning experience at taxpayers' expense, because I didn't put up a dime for lawyers or anything. The costs involved to me were absolutely minimal. You know, maybe a few photocopies I had to make of things to, you know, for evidence purposes and so on, but that was about it. I don't know how much it cost taxpayers in terms of the, you know, being arrested and going to trial and yada yada yada. I'm sure some thousands of dollars worth of taxpayers' money were flushed down the toilet, essentially. Could have been put to better use for sure. You know, there are other more legitimate uses of the criminal justice system than misusing a law that prohibits disrupting the order and solemnity of church services to try and force a protester to end his protest, because there were serious consequences. The law it carried a prison sentence of 2 years maximum. If I'd been convicted, I in theory could spend as much as 2 years in jail. So it wasn't a lightweight nothing thing. There were potentially serious consequences if I was found guilty. But I knew it was like such total bullshit that the chances of being found guilty were close to zero. I said, well, I'll defend myself. If by some fluke, by some mismanagement of the justice system, I'm actually found guilty, well, then I'll get a lawyer for an appeal. But that was not necessary. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that, the leadership of the Unitarian Church in Montreal essentially, had no qualms about misusing a law that is clearly intended to prevent actual disruption of a church service, inside a church, in an effort to force an end to a very peaceful, generally quiet protest outside the church. They essentially misused the Canadian Criminal Code in an effort to silence a critic. Which brings us back to the Unitarian Universalist Association's threat to have me charged with the criminal act of blasphemous libel. This is basically a similar strategy where this time the head office, the Vatican, as it were, of the Unitarian Universalist religious community in America, is threatening to have me charged with the criminal act of blasphemous libel for allegedly making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. That's the pretext for accusing me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel, which also carries